Hi, this is Debbie, and this is the second episode of Paranormal Knitting and Crochet. Welcome. I hope you enjoyed the first episode if you saw it, and I hope you'll enjoy this episode as well. I'm very sorry about the quality of the camera. It seemed to be better the first time I did it, and I'm just going to have to buy another camera. So sorry about that. But this is a paranormal knitting and crochet, podcast. And the reason being is that, as I said in the last show, I am a medium and with many years of experience, basically working out of Lilydale Assembly, which is a spiritualist community in New York State, Western New York, in Lilydale, New York, which has been there since 1879. And I do work in Canada in the off season for a relative who is a foot specialist. So I do phone readings in the winter, but in the summer, my brother gets a student so that I can go down to Lilydale for the whole summer and do my reading work. So this is basically about knitting, but at the end there's always a section on a true ghost story that I've experienced. And I will publish or I speak about other ghost stories that my friends have had, or perhaps you're going to write in and tell me an experience you've had. And last week, or 2 weeks ago, sorry, I said that I would talk about when I went to the Tower of London in England in 2011, and I had an experience there. So I will talk about that experience today. It's not about beheadings, what you hear about most when they talk about the Tower of London. It's something quite different because before it was a prison and they beheaded people, it was a castle way back to William the Conqueror's time. And so we'll talk about that later. Okay, but first, talk about projects on the needles, or as I put it, haven't crossed over to the other side yet. A rather large crochet project. And this is I would say 2/3 done, and it is the Irish Lattice Afghan by Mary Genin, and it's found in the Blue Ribbon Afghan book by Leisure Arts. So here it is, and I'm using an eye hook. The project takes about 3,900 yards of worsted weight yarn, as you can imagine, because it is an Afghan, a full-size Afghan, and I am using an eye hook. And I am using Caron 1-pounder yarn, and in the rose colorway and it's cream colorway. And I'm making it for a friend because she saw I made another one before a couple of years ago, and my boyfriend took it, and it was navy blue and cream. So she really liked it, and she asked if I could make her one. It's the second Afghan that I've made for her. Her name's Paula, and she lives in the States. And she's not shy about asking for things. And in a way, that's good because she gets things, But you know how we knitters and crocheters get annoyed when... But she appreciates it so much that I can't say no, because she actually appreciates it. So that makes a big difference, because I don't think I'll knit for my nieces and nephew anymore because they don't really appreciate it. I think some people just don't, and they're young, they're at that age. So that's all that I have on the needles. The first time I did the podcast, I mentioned I want to cast on socks. I just haven't had time. What with work, I'm going to try and do these podcasts once a week, but I couldn't last week, and we'll see how that goes. This is just basically going to be a short knitting and crochet content today because I don't have a lot to talk about. But I am going to talk about my finished objects, or they have crossed over to the other side. They're finally off the needles. And this is the Wurm Hat. And the English translation is worm. I guess for all of these ridges, pearl ridges that go around, kind of looks like a worm or a snake. And I was working on this in the first video, and it is for me, which I rarely make things for myself. So yay, I finally finished something for me. Probably a lot of you are feeling the same thing. But It's by Catherina Nopp. It's called the Wurm, W-U-R-M, that many of you have made, and it is a free pattern on Ravelry. I used worsted weight, not sport weight, as the pattern called for, so I went down in the needle sizes because I knit big anyway. So I started off actually with quite a small magic loop needle for this double thick rim, which is a nice interesting rim the way you make that on the pattern. I like that. And I moved up to a 5mm to do the rest because I didn't like how these were coming out with a smaller needle. Now I haven't blocked this hat. I don't know how you would block it, and someone could tell me. But I like the colors. I like how they turned out. I basically used a discontinued yarn by Bernat, which has, I thought it had wool content in it. It was Bernat Mosaic, but I'm not sure it does. But it was kind of their answer to Noro. You know, I love Noro Crayon and their different yarns. And I thought, oh, yay, we have a cheap alternative to Noro we can afford. However, they discontinued it. But there's plenty of other substitutes, I guess, now. Maybe someone could let me know if they found something like this that isn't as expensive, although I do intend on taking a shopping trip soon and getting some Noro from Romney Wools in Toronto, which is a fabulous wool store. And I live in the GTA, which is general, or Toronto area. It's not general. But the Toronto area, Mississauga actually, which is a western suburb kind of, not really part of Toronto, but might as well be. And so that's not too far. I have to go into the city. And I used in between these purl rows, I used a yarn that I mentioned on the first show, but I lost the ball band, but it is wool. It's from Italy, where I went in 2013 and went on a tour with my boyfriend, and I got this beautiful purple yarn that's in the knit ridges, and it's a really nice color. So when I made this, it's very warm, and I made this pom-pom too with I'm so happy about the new pom-pom makers I bought, the Clover pom-pom makers, and I actually showed them in the last video that I made. And I used just some acrylic purple to match the hat because I kind of ran out of the purple wool. And I just love those pom-pom makers, and I've got to get the huge one because on the podcast Geeky Girls Knit, which is really a fabulous podcast, she's got the big huge one, and I want to get that one. I thought I had all the sizes, but apparently I don't. Anyway, this came out really nice. It is on my Ravelry webpage, and I can recommend the pattern. It's a very good pattern, and it's free, which is nice. The other project that I have that's crossed over to the other side, and I'm sort of happy it has, is the Ruffle Scarf. And I mentioned this last time, and I hadn't finished it, but it's beautiful sort of pewter colors and different kinds of silvers, and it's really, really pretty. And this is for my mother. And I do hope she'll wear it because she asked for it, and I was kind of dreading it, and I thought, oh no, I'm going to have to work with that red Heart Sashay yarn, which it is. And I explained a little bit the technique last week, how you knit with this, because it's not like your normal knitting, but you can also make a crochet version. But I found the knitting version easier, and there's plenty of videos on how to work with this yarn on the YouTube. I find YouTube is so helpful, and thank God for all those people who post those helpful videos for everything. But I hope she wears it, because when she saw it, she said, oh, it looks like a clown ruffle, and I don't know. I said, I hope you wear it after I made it. So here it is, and that's another finished object. Yay! So now I can cast on some socks. I do work at a foot clinic, so if I do get attached to doing socks, it's perhaps could be a little business on the side. Well, we'll see. Anyway, so I wanted to give a shout out to some of my favorite podcasts, and I did that on the first video a little bit, but I know I left some out. besides Geeky Girls Knit, I like Smells Like Yarn, and he does a lot of podcasts or video casts about different things, a lot about yarn, and it's in his knitting, but some other things. He buys things on sale like candles, and those are interesting too. He's very fun to watch, and I really enjoy watching him. And then we have Dramatic Knits with two hosts, which are great. And I also watch Delusional Knitter, and I find her very entertaining, and I love the colors she knits with. It's wonderful. And she's designing, I think, too. So a lot of these people are also designing, which is kudos to them, because I don't think I'm as analytical enough to be able to design a pattern. And I think you have to have a math brain, and I don't. I don't have that kind of a brain. So anyway, there's others too, like Gimme Yarn 418. She has excellent videos, and she makes her living, I believe, doing craft shows and that sort of thing, which is amazing. And her videos are outstanding. I've watched The Knit Shift, and that's wonderful, a journalist who I think works in the evening, and a number of them. I think there's one called Paradise Knitting. That's a good one. So it's always fun to watch all these wonderful knitting shows, and I hope that you'll enjoy this one too, and especially if you are interested in paranormal and ghosts, because I'll explain more about that later, as I did on the first video. But as far as TV, and I haven't really developed sort of different sections with themes in my videos yet. I've seen that on other podcasts, but this will develop with better cameras, with better knowledge of how to do these videos and edit them, because I'm a real newbie and novice, and I hope you can bear with me. And I don't really have a private place to record. It's really hard for me to get to do that, so we'll work on that too, and my background and lighting and so on. But the other thing is, as far as TV goes, I tend to watch Netflix like everybody else. I binge watch shows, and it's hard to find a show that isn't offensive anymore on HBO, let's say, or Netflix. But I tend to, like, I've been watching Land Girls on Netflix, which is a wonderful, heartwarming series about World War II in England, and these ladies that were recruited by the government to work on the land to basically feed England while the men were off at war. And I find that's very good. But I've watched that basically. I watched the IT Crowd, which is a UK-based show recently about guys working in an IT department and their boss, who's a woman, and it was really funny. And Richard Ayoade's in that, and he's real funny. Movies, I recently went to see the new Star Wars movie. I found that wonderful. I love that. And I started watching something called Shadow Hunters, which is, they had the first 2 episodes on Netflix about a girl who can see demons. She's a shadow hunter, and she didn't know she could do it. And it kind of reminds me of me, because she was standing there talking to someone that nobody else could see, and that's happened to me a lot in my life. So it is kind of a young person show, and I don't like everything about it, but it doesn't have, like, every second word is an F, which I don't mind because I swear, but a lot of these shows have a lot of unnecessary, horrible sex scenes and things that there's no chemistry between the characters, and they don't bother to build up the character before they jump into that. And maybe it's my generation. I mean, I don't want to watch boring shows either, but like, I don't like excessive violence and sexual content and things like that. Like, I don't think it's necessary. But I'm not a prude. I mean, I enjoy many shows, and they do have bad language, but there's a lot that's just very, like, hard and awful and but I have found enough to watch on Netflix and TV. And in fact, when I go back in the summer to my house in Lilydale, which is usually mid-May to Labor Day, I'm not going to get cable again because it's so expensive. As you know, you get the internet and the cable bundles, and it's so expensive. But I found out if I just broadcast Netflix to my TV using my Chromecast, which is a little device that some of you may use to watch YouTube on your TV, because there's a lot of old movies and stuff on YouTube. And you can buy a little thing and you just stick it in the side of your computer, and you can get, it's $5. You can get it at Big Lots, and you can watch CNN. I mean, I like to watch CNN. I like to be, not all the time, but to be up on the news. And you have to pay so much to a cable company. So I think it's all going online anyway. All the shows, and look at this. We watch podcasts that just people put their own content up and we watch it. So who needs all this cable anymore? That's the way it's going, you know, and so that's really creative and positive, I think. So now, just wanted to, last week I said I would talk to you about what happened to me at the Tower of London. And this was in 2011. I was born in England but raised in Canada from a very young age. But I went back first when I was a teenager in 1972 to England, and we did go to the Tower. I don't remember much about it. I went back in 83. I did not go to the Tower or spend time in London. In 2011, I went in January and came back mid-February. I was there for a whole month. And I stayed for 2 weeks with a friend up in Kettering area, which I think is Northumberland, in the little town of Rothwell. And her son has a bath and bathroom place, you know, where he sells really nice fixtures and things for the bath. So, but I stayed there 2 weeks. I traveled to Cambridge and saw the University of Cambridge, King's College, which is wonderful. Took a walking tour. I highly recommend, if you go to Cambridge, to take a tour of, see the Cam River. And there's a bridge that crosses the Cam River, which doesn't have one nail in it. It's a wooden bridge. It's quite fascinating. And they have just great architecture and very old, you know, that was a monastery there, Cambridge, before the university, before it became a university. Very ancient, very old. And there's a great department store called David Lewis in England, and they have it in Cambridge, and they had it again in London when I went down there. And it has a really good yarn department, or it did when I went, and it had tons of Noro. And I did take some pictures of it. I don't know if I still have it online, the pictures, but if I do, I'll try and insert it if I know how to edit again, because it seems like 1 week I know and the next week I don't know how. But after that, after 2 weeks at her place, my friend Trish, I went down to London by myself for 2 weeks. And you have to know that there's a lot of history in England, and therefore there's a lot of ghosts and spirits. Where there's more energy, there's going to be more ghosts, because they can manifest more easily when there's a lot of energy. You know, they just like to hang out in that kind of a place. Or because there's been more history, they're familiar with the place. Many people are familiar with it because there's been many souls, you know, that have grown up and died there. So I explained last week, I'm not the type of medium that recognizes a spirit when it's as real as you or I, because they just come up and talk to you, and then you just think it's another person until they start saying weird things, and then when they leave, then you realize. And that's what happens to me. Even though I'm a medium, it doesn't go like that in a reading. It's all sort of mental mediumship. You hear words, you get a strong sense of things. There's clairaudience, clairsentience, clairvoyance, clairvoyance seeing, clairaudience hearing, clairsentience a general feeling, clairgustience tasting. Let's say a spirit liked whiskey. I could taste it sometimes. Clairnasient smelling. Marijuana, whatever. They might have smoked. That happened to me. Some spirit that came in. And the person I was reading recognized who it was right away. So these are some of the ways we work in mediumship. But the ghost thing, it's happened in Lilydale, but I'll explain that on other shows, because it's never that I could recognize it at the time. Such was the case when I went to London, and I'm sorry about this setup here, it's wobbling. I have to work on that. As I went to London and I went to the tower the last day before I was to leave, which was mid-February of 2011, I went to enter the tower complex. I went by myself. I wasn't part of a guided tour. I didn't read all the signs or the history of it either. I usually do that afterwards. So I'm not one that is a history buff and studies up ahead of time or looks at all the signs, or even I don't always take a guided tour. So as I was going toward the entrance, suddenly I saw these beefeaters, and those are the guards of the old tower that wear a red outfit and kind of a flat, kind of a beret hat. And there are actors at all these major London attractions. I mean, they do have guys dressed like beefeaters walking around. They have women in medieval costume walking around. So it's easy for me to assume that they're actors. Let's just put it that way. And, you know, so when I went to go through the gateway to go in, these two beefeaters crossed the sword and the axe like this in front of me, so I couldn't go through the entryway. And I stopped. And there was a guy behind me, a young guy and a girl, and he said, "Why don't people go through?" And I thought, how rude. How could I possibly go through this? They got this closed off. But I looked at one of the beefeaters, and he smiled. And then they went, and I could go through. So I carried on, and I went through, and I saw a big kind of rounded building, like a huge turret kind of on the right. So I was approaching that because I figured that's the first place you would go and look in. And coming toward me, kind of, I think it was on my right-hand side, was a lady dressed like a medieval nurse or maid or something, I don't know. And she went to walk by me on my right, and I looked at her, and I smiled, and I said, "Hi." And she gave me this really weird look, like, and I just laughed because I figured they're actors, you know. But she went past me toward where those beefeaters were, and about 20 feet or maybe 30 feet away was the stairs going up to this big round building, which I later found out was a bedroom of a castle, an original castle. So I got to the bottom of those stairs where you go up there, and all of a sudden, this maid came from nowhere and was right there beside me, the one that passed me, and I thought, how the hell did she get there? She went, you must have transported or something. It didn't occur to me anything was odd. And she was going, "You can't go up there, don't go up there, don't go up there." And I said, "Why not? Why wouldn't I go up there?" And she said, "Because they're there today, they're there." And I thought, what the heck? I said, "Well, I'm going up there." I was laughing. I figured she was an actress, you know. So again, there was a guy behind me. It might have been that same guy, young guy, with a girl. And he said, "Are you talking to yourself now?" And I was outraged. I thought, how rude can you possibly be? You know, and I never thought anything that this woman was other than a human, because that's how real, I mean, like flesh and blood, that's how real ghosts can appear. So she just went like this and took off before that guy said that, because she was mad. I think I was going to go up there. So anyway, I went up there, and there was a big line up ahead of me because they were on a guided tour. And I was the last one behind them. And in front of me, there was a young woman. I don't know where she was from. Anyway, I don't know what happened to that guy that said that comment or where he went. But they were lined up to go into the next room to the left. To the right was the bedroom. And at that time, apparently, I didn't know, it was the bedroom of King Edward I and his wife Eleanor of Aquitaine. And that was back in the 1200s, you know, and no doubt other kings and queens or whatever lived in there since then. So I didn't see anyone in that room, but there was a bed, and there was a nice fireplace, and then on this far wall there was nice windows, and I just sort of looked at it and lined up. So these other people ahead of me were on a tour, and I could hear the tour guide yelling, very loud talking, trying to explain to them what was in the next room. So these people were waiting to get in the next room, and I guess when they got there, she was going to go on this spiel again. I don't know. So I'm minding my own business, and I'm looking kind of to the right, and just above to the right of the lineup ahead of me, there was, all of a sudden, I noticed a man inside the rope in the room itself with a crown on his head and dressed like a king. So I naturally assumed, well, it's another actor. So I looked, and his eye caught mine, and I am quite shy, really, and I didn't want that to happen because I don't really want to have to play act with an actor. You know, I'm not that type of person, and it's embarrassing to me. And I thought, oh no. And he came over, and yes, he was all decked out like a king with the crown and all. So, and I could understand these spirits. It's not like they were speaking Middle English or Old English or whatever they spoke in the 12th century or 13th century. So I don't know if that's just a thing with ghosts. You just understand what they're saying despite the language or dialect. It was English, but he said, "Do you not bow to your king?" And I was like, oh no. So I thought, I got to play act. So I curtsied, and that's when the girl ahead of me turned around and looked at me. She looked at me because she noticed that. And I noticed that she kept turning around and looking at me periodically. So apparently we carried on a little bit of a conversation. I can't remember all of it, but I do remember his saying, where are you from? You're not from here, are you? And I said, no, I'm from Canada. And I am. I'm a dual citizen of Canada and the US, actually. And he said, I don't know where that is. So I started laughing because I'm just playing along. And he says, he looks kind of like this. He says, oh, I know, that's across the sea, isn't it? And I said, yes, it is. And he says to me, you've come a long way. And I said, yes, I have. And in the middle of this, I have to tell you, on the bed, there was a beautiful lady, and she had beautiful blonde hair, and she was beautiful looking, just natural, beautiful looking woman. And she was looking at him that whole time and never looked at me. I don't think she saw me. And she looked with such love in her eyes, and there was such a feeling of love in that room and warmth. So we got into the next room, and the girl that was in front of me turned around and said to me, who were you talking to in there? And I said, well, the actors, of course. Who else would I be? She said, there was no one in there. And I said, yes, there were. And so she said, look, I'm going to take you back to that room. So we went back, and there was a cold feeling. Whatever was there had gone. Nothing. Nothing, was just cold. And she said, well, where did they go? I said, well, there's an open door. They could have gone out the door. So you see how skeptical I am, and I'm a medium. And as I said on the first show, I'm a stupid medium because I don't even know when I see a spirit. I do get the feelings, and I know that in my readings, but ghosts they're that real sometimes, okay? I mean, I have had just the voice, and my boyfriend heard it. That one I'll tell you next week, next episode. And that's the one in New York City where there's a lot of history too. So anyway, she went and got the guide who was explaining everything, and she was on that tour, and she told the guide, and the guide said, it was a pretty snippy guide with a loud voice, and she said, there's no actors on this tour. There's no actors in here today. She did. So I said, well, I saw them. And then she said, where are you from? I said, Canada. And she said, what do you do there? I said, well, I am a medium, and then she just shut me off and took off. I don't know what she thought, if I'm trying to be famous because I saw something, which is ridiculous. I didn't know I saw something. I didn't know till I got home and I thought about it. And I saw a scary movie, and then it jogged me. And I thought, I did see spirits, you know. It's because all my life I've seen them and not known. And people have thought that I was nuts and I was talking to myself. Like I said, all the way from when I was very young in university it happened. Like last week I told that story. And there's another story about university I'll tell you later on. So seems to be something with me that I can see them. And it's not something you can force. They're just there when they're there and the conditions are right. But that girl who got the guy came back and she said, you know what? She says, you had an experience. I think you saw something. And that's the last I saw of her. And people don't believe these stories when you tell them, because if you have not experienced this, it's easy not to believe it. And it's true about human beings. If you haven't had an experience and someone tells you, you think they're full of it. But you have to be not so open that your brain falls out, but you have to realize that, not be unduly prejudiced. Because just because you haven't seen or felt something doesn't mean that somebody else hasn't experienced it. And, you know, and that's really hard to take for human beings, that people doubt their veracity and their honesty. And it's just like UFOs. I mean, I saw one UFO once, and it was way up in the atmosphere, and I was looking because I thought it was a satellite until it took a 90-degree turn, and it was way up where the satellites were. It must have been huge. It was blue, but I thought, I was looking with a friend, and the friend saw it go 90-degree turn, and my grandfather saw one. So I trust that, you know, I trust my grandfather. But yeah, we always deny, and I do it myself when I hear something. If I haven't experienced it, I'm not, you know, it pays to be somewhat skeptical, or you'd be duped all your life. So we do live in this reality, but there are other realities. Anyways, I don't want to go on and bore you all with all of this. So I'm just going to end it there. We're at about 30 minutes, 31 minutes. And I'm going to say thank you so much for listening this week. And God bless you. And I'll see you in another week or two. I'm not sure what the, if I will be able to do it next week, because I think I'll be away for the weekend. But maybe I can do it when I'm down in the States, because I'm going probably down there. So God bless you and have a wonderful week. And remember, I have to tell you now, there is a Ravelry group. It's called Spooky Knitting and Crochet. You can join that if you would and subscribe to my channel. My channel is Paranormal Knitting and Crochet. I've talked enough and I'm getting coughing now. So if you subscribe to this, it'll be great. When I have about maybe 40 subscribers, maybe 30, I'll start giving away presents. I've got books, I've got some yarn. So thank you again. God bless. Tune in next time.